Welcome to Tikvah Radio Show, The Sound of Hope. I'm Liliana Inez, your host. Someone once said that God speaks to people in different ways. Did you ever have dreams, visions, or a special experience in which you felt God was speaking to you? The Torah tells us that Abraham, Jacob, and many others heard and experienced God. Does Adonai speak to people like that nowadays? On Tikvah Radio, we interview people who have had an encounter with the God of Israel, a special experience. Some have even had personal miracles, and all have found the Messiah of Israel. Stay tuned to Tikvah Radio Show and hear an amazing story of someone who was encountered by God. Welcome, Mishpacha. We are so glad that you joined us. Today, our guest is Rabbi Elliot Kleiman. Welcome to Tikvah Radio Show, Rabbi Elliot. Glad to have you here with us.
Well, I'm very glad to be here, and I'm very happy to share my journey with all the listeners out there. My journey is really about a Jewish person who accepted Jesus and remains Jewish to this very day. I was raised in a modern Orthodox Jewish home, actually in Cincinnati, Ohio, which was a bastion of Jewish life and people. And there, my grandparents, at least three of them who I was exposed to, were ultra-Orthodox. My grandfather never ate outside the home. He kept kosher. He walked to the synagogue on Shabbat. He went to the synagogue on weekdays, and he would drive there then, of course. And he was from the old country, actually from Lithuania, along with my grandmother. They lived in villages, shtetls, in Lithuania in the early 1900s to avoid conscription into the military, and also to avoid the pogroms, the attacks upon Jewish settlements that were going on. They left their area and through a long journey came to the United States. And they settled in Louisville, Kentucky. And it was there that my mom was born. So my grandparents on the other side, I didn't know my grandfather, who is my namesake. I'm actually named after him. His name was Israel Kleiman. Mm-hmm. And so my Hebrew name reflects that. My grandmother passed away when I was about 5 years old, so I didn't have a whole lot of exposure. But they were from Belarus and also very Orthodox, very observant Jews. This was the atmosphere in which I was reared. I attended a Orthodox synagogue along with my parents there in Cincinnati, Ohio. Ohav Shalom. And, of course, I had my first religious experience when I was like 8 days old. It's called circumcision. Yeah. I don't remember it. But in any event, like all Jewish males, you enter into or affirm the covenant between us and our God, the Jewish people, and God, in recognition. And there is a circumcision, a brit milah is called, as it's called, and a little suda, or a party. Now, at age 13, I became a bar mitzvah. And there I ascended to the bima there, where I recited my Torah portion and my portion from the prophets as well, called the Haftorah, and conducted the Shabbat morning service, actually. Now, this was really the first time that I became aware of of spirituality or the lack thereof. I thought that when a Jewish boy became 13 years old, he became a man, and that something was going to happen. Bells were going to go off in heaven. There was going to be this revelation, and, it was a disappointment. It was nice, and I got lots of gelt money, and we had a nice party and the like, but spiritually speaking, I didn't have any type of encounter. I continued in the synagogue until I was 15 years old, 2 years after my bar mitzvah, and I was attracted mainly by the Sunday morning breakfast that they had, the minyan breakfast, which was eggs and matzah and the like, and it was matzah brai, I believe it was. But I didn't really have any connection.
Right.
So what happens is that I went off basically in what we could say the world. I mean, worldliness, where I pursued other interests. I pursued education. Education was big in our family. You needed to be a doctor or a lawyer or some profession.
Right.
And so we were very education-minded as a family. I pursued sport. I was a gymnast. I was into karate. I did many sports and really found some satisfaction in that. Health fanaticism. I was into health diets. I was into Easternism. I was into lots of pursuit of the world, into motorbikes, motorcycle. I had a motorcycle. But I continued to advance my education. I went to undergraduate at the University of Cincinnati. I went to law school there. I went to Harvard Law School for a graduate law program. And I thought that, I had reached the pinnacle now. But there was something missing. I was aware that there was an empty spot in my heart.
Cliff, can I ask you something, Rabbi Elliot, real quick? You did your bar mitzvah, and you were looking for something to happen, and it didn't. So it's kind of neat that you were expecting a spiritual experience, and that you probably were being you receive all this training and you felt from everything you read and heard that you should have had something special happen.
The build-up was great. The build-up was great, and the fact that at least we were led to believe that we passed from childhood to manhood, and that now we were responsible to God for our behavior and for our sin. I just felt that there would be some type of epiphany, some type of revelation, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, maybe some kind of a connection with God at that point, and you didn't feel like anything happened. And so you were sharing about you went into education. Did I hear you say something about that you also got into some kind of Eastern philosophy or spirituality? What happened there? Again, it sounds like you were looking for something. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, I was definitely searching. And there in Cambridge, Massachusetts, there were 48 universities and colleges within about a 6-mile radius where people came from all over to share their secrets of success, of non-success. It was the height of the Vietnam War. It was drug culture. And I was caught up in a lot of that. There was also the Easternism. There was lots of isms and schisms that were going around, and the sound of the Om, where you would just concentrate on the sound of the Om, which is the universal sound of the universe. Timothy Leary came by, and others with drums, and Buddha, you could have your own mantra, and you could look at Buddha, and he'd look back at you. And so there was definitely this intense search for something to satisfy and complete my spiritual being.
Yeah.
And so as I look back, yes, I was definitely searching.
Definitely. That was a generation that there was just thousands, hundreds of thousands of people going into those Eastern religions looking for a spiritual experience and to get touched by God, whatever,
absolutely.
Yeah, even through the drugs and stuff. But there was a lot of people that were in that same place as you were, that were seeking, and that's that hunger that whole God has put in our heart for Him. And so you were looking for that, because that's a real thing. That's something that God put in us that not only He could fill. And when you were going through that, did you feel like you were getting something, or you just kind of felt like confusion and you went from one thing to the other? What was your experience?
I would really focus on what I was doing and the particular aspect. I mean, I was reading certain literature of the day. As I said, caught up in the entire anti-war movement. I smoked dope occasionally. I wasn't like a big drug head, but I, like many and most of the people at the time on campuses, were smoking marijuana and hashish and the like.
Definitely.
But I was able to maintain my studies. So in search, I thought, well, I need to travel. I need to take a trip. And that's exactly what I did. I graduated from Harvard Law with an LLM, a master's in law, focused on medical legal aspects of the law. And I had $300 plus a plane ticket, and I went to Europe. 7 weeks. I journeyed for 7 weeks, 42 days, and I had an itinerary. I went to England, I went to France, I went to Germany, I was in Denmark and the Netherlands, and so I was traveling throughout, and as I was traveling, it was in the summertime, I became more and more aware of a parent life force that was somewhat personalized, because it seemed like this parent life force was interested in me. Now,
can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. Whenever I was like hungry. Now, I had $300, but it's rather complex as you're traveling to all of these countries, and Belgium also, and Luxembourg I was in. And there's different currencies back then. It isn't like the European Union now, where one currency fits all.
Right.
So if I landed in one country on Sunday, and there was no way of exchanging my money, I had to do with what I had. And so it just seemed like something would open up. Some young people, young hippies like me, would be there. There'd be an open party. There would be food, a shelter. it's cold, even though it's the winter. At night, it's still, I mean, summer, the summer, but it still gets cold in the winter in those European countries. And there would be a church that would open up, or there would be someone who would say, hey, you want to crash at my place for a while. So, in fact, one time I was just walking, and I don't doubt that there were days that I would walk 20 miles. I mean, I didn't have transportation. Of course, there was public transportation. I tried to avoid all of that. I didn't have much money. You know, staying in hotels, that just didn't work. I had $300 for 7 weeks.
Uh-huh.
So, and most of that was, you know, food. So the point is that one time I remember that I was hungry. I was kind of looking for food, and an apple dropped off of a truck. Now, yeah, right in front of me. Now I was very honest. I was an honest person. I mean, I could, you know, that didn't bother me. I mean, an apple dropped off. I ate the apple.
Right.
I found a wallet in one country, and it had money in it and everything. I turned it into the police station, which was interesting because about 4 months later, after I came home, I got a letter from the police, and they gave me a reward, which I wasn't even expecting. I forget, it was a percentage of what was in there, but that was fine. So what happened was that I wound up in Finland. Actually, it wasn't really on my itinerary, but I thought, hey, I can get more countries under my belt. And so, because I've got more time, now I've got a ticket to get home, and I have to be at Heathrow Airport on a certain date. So I was trying to just coordinate carefully. But I wound up, it was a little port called, it was in Sweden, Kapellskär, Sweden. That was on my itinerary, Sweden. And I was in Stockholm, and I gave blood in Stockholm. I mean, I was sort of like becoming more and more of a spiritual man, not totally understanding what was happening in this transformation. But in Naantali, it was Kapellskär, Sweden, I got on a big ferry boat that was on its way to Finland, Naantali, Finland. And I was just ushered on. It was strange. I tried to pay. They didn't even take my money. They didn't want my money, or they didn't. I don't know what was happening. I didn't speak the language, of course, and I didn't hear any English. But I wound up, and I took a trip, or wound up in Finland, and then I hitchhiked to Helsinki. And there in Helsinki, I was in a courtyard outside, and there were other kids around. They were younger than I. They were high school students, and we were just doing what kids do. I mean, maybe I think there was a coffee, tea shop, or whatever. But we were in the outside courtyard. And here was a flaming motorcycle accident that occurred right in front of me. Wow. I can't remember if the motorcycle hit a tree. I don't think so. But somehow I did see a person fly off the motorcycle, and it was a very traumatic experience. There were 2 people on the motorcycle, and I think one was killed. Wow. And we experienced that together. And so that prompted us to talk with each other, that is, the high school students and myself. And they did speak some English. And they said, hey, would you like to come to the little A-frame house that we have on the foot of the woods? Our parents are out of town. And I thought, great, a place to have an overnight stay, a place to rest, and really, it's cold up there. In the summer, in the evening, it can get very cold.
Yeah.
So I said, sure. We went up there, and I stayed overnight, and I said, I'm going to go outside. I wandered into the woods, and I was wandering in the woods, and here I felt like so free from homework, from a paper, any paper that was due. It seemed like, since I'd been in kindergarten, and I was 25 years old, I had been in school the whole time.
Yeah.
And so I'm just basically feeling free, and now I'm ready to come out of the woods, and I was lost, totally lost.
Oh, my goodness.
I didn't know how to get out of the woods, and I was afraid of going far into the woods. The sun was hugging the horizon. It doesn't get totally dark in the summer there, and I was scared. I visioned a bear coming. When you had real fear, your mind just starts tripping on things and just hyper focused and paranoid and the like. And it was an experience I had never had before. And I said, Elliot, you've got to calm down. I thought that they should have taught me something practical in school, like how to get out of the woods. But I was a city boy and wasn't really good at that kind of stuff. So I started to think about my past life. Now, I want to tell you that when I was at Harvard for that year, I went home to Cincinnati, Ohio, for winter break. And I had a friend who I was very close to from high school onward. And he and I were really good buddies. And we participated together in just hanging out and smoking some dope and the like. And when I was there on break, he said, Elliot, he said, I want to tell you what happened to me. He said, I was in my living room and Jesus visited me. I said, what are you talking about, John? He said, no, it's true. And he told me basically an experience that he had with Jesus. And I said, John, I'm Jewish. I can't relate to it. And he said, Elliot, remember, I'm half Jewish. My dad is Jewish. I said, okay, well, I'm half listening. Well, that was basically it. And I know that John was praying for me. And I don't doubt that his prayers pursued me into the woods there in Finland in the summer of 1970. And it was there that I saw the pattern of life and what had befell me, where I would get into sport and really get into it, but then I'd fatigue on it. I'd get into karate. I would get into particular endeavors, motorcycles, and really get into the motors, and then I would fatigue on it. And everything seemed to just be slippery. And then everything became dark, except there was this little light in my head. I can't totally explain it, but I remember that it was quicksand. I was in quicksand, and everything I grabbed at, whether it be education, whether it was health fanaticism, whether it was a particular sport, working out. I was a bodybuilder, weightlifter in contests. Whatever it was, I would fatigue on, and it became dissatisfying. I cried out to God for the first time ever in this total darkness. Everything I was reaching up for seemed to fall down. I pulled down, and it came down with me in the quicksand. And I looked at my backpack, and I said, Lord. I think I said Lord. I might have said God, but I said, I know I said this. I'm not interested in the things of the world. I just want to serve you. And that was the key that opened up completely a whole new door, a whole new window, a whole new life. Because at that moment, I knew that it was true, that Jesus came down for me personally in the woods, and that he now was living in me. I didn't have any astute understanding. I'd never read the New Testament. I never heard the gospel, except maybe in some superficial way in which I wasn't listening. And so I just felt like a new creature. Yeah. And I picked up my bag there. It was basically all my worldly possessions. And I started to run. And I was crying, and I felt a relief totally. I felt really light, and I ran right out of the woods.
Wow, you didn't even know where you were going. That's pretty amazing.
It was like the God who created me and delivered me from the woods physically also delivered me spiritually. And really, that started the venture of 40 years plus in the Lord, seeking to serve him and to maintain, of course, my Jewishness, and reach out to others who maybe have found themselves in a similar situation, desperate and hopeless, that I was in.
So what you were looking for way back there and expecting a spiritual experience, you got it in the woods by yourself. And so God, Yeshua was looking for you. He was after you, and he got you in the woods. That's pretty amazing that God has this way of reaching out to us. It's like custom made for who we are. How he took care of you when you were in Europe with that small amount of money, and things would turn out so that you'd have, food and places to stay. But that big, like a visit, you had like a visit, a God encounter in the woods.
It's true. And, we think that in terms of, well, we've got to work hard and come to God and reach out to him. It's God in search of man.
Right.
And he has already extended his arm, and that's what he did to me. And there I passed from death to life. I only found those words later when I was given a New Testament in Oslo, Norway, several days later. And it's been a whole journey since then where God has been my guide.
That's wonderful. Tell me, how did your life change? How do you see yourself different now than how you were before you had that encounter with Yeshua?
Well, I think that it gave me purpose and direction, and my spiritual eyes of understanding were open so that I saw God moving in circumstances and in people, and he led me to a whole group of Jewish believers in Cincinnati, Ohio, had no idea. I thought I was the only Jewish person that ever accepted Jesus. And I said, I asked him the question. I talked to God. I found out that that's called prayer. And the change has been that I'm here to serve not myself. I'm now in the service of someone who's bigger than I am, in the creator of the universe. And as a result, I wound up leading a Messianic congregation, being heavily involved in the Messianic Jewish movement, and to this very day am daily involved in spiritual matters connected to that call.
That's great.
So I married a wonderful woman who I met in my law office. We've been married 43 years.
Awesome.
And when I met her, she said she was born an atheist and she would die an atheist. But God got a hold of her and she accepted the Lord, and we got married in 1974.
Wow, that's a story too there. Yeah.
And we're on the same page, and that's so important in a marriage, to be in sync spiritually as well as otherwise.
Mm-hmm. So you've had an interesting journey since that experience in the woods. That's amazing. What I really love about what you were saying is that it's not so much that we go after God, although there is that hunger, but that he's coming after us, and he wants us close to him. He values having a relationship with us, and you probably started seeing afterwards that all the different times where you were being taken care of, where you were talking about that parent, that he's like a spiritual parent that's watching over us. And sometimes we don't realize until after we come to Yeshua all the different times in our lives before we knew him where he had been intervening, where he had been helping, where he was there in our lives doing things and we weren't aware. Did you kind of look back and think about some of the things that you went through prior to the woods where you could see that?
Everything falls in place once you come into an intimate relationship with the Lord of this universe. All of your past was necessary to get you to that one place where you encounter and have a personal relationship with him. And for all the listeners out there and any perhaps who have not entered into this relationship, I didn't realize it, but I found that there actually was a key that unlocks the door, and it's the key of repentance. I didn't know the word. I mean, I may have known the word repentance, but I wasn't thinking in those terms. But I was just motivated as I saw the temporality, the temporal nature of this life, and darkness subsumed me. I was moved to recognize how small I was, and it humbled me in a contrite way to call out to the God of the universe by just telling him and asking him. He will answer your prayer. If you don't know who he is, ask him. But keep your eyes open and your ears open as well, because he will show you the way. He's the truth. He's the way, and he's the life.
Would you feel good about saying a prayer for anyone out there that might be searching? Yes.
Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we come before you, and we just pray, Lord, for that one who is listening and who is searching in their heart, who feels incomplete, and who is wondering what I'm going to do with my life. I pray, Lord, for those who are in that situation. And I pray that they would come to you by saying, Lord, though I'm not worthy, and I know that I'm not worthy, I put my trust in you, and I asked you, your Son, Jesus, who died for me, to come into my life and to resurrect me now so that I might have the richness that is promised through your word. And we pray it in the name of Yeshua, that's Jesus. Amen.
Amen. What an unusual encounter with Adonai Rabbi Elliot had. In that special time in the forest, he had an amazing revelation of God about his life. He learned that although he diligently pursued noble causes, he found in the end his heart would lose interest in the long run. He had good intentions, but deep inside, perhaps unconsciously, his heart knew something was missing in his life. All the attempts he made to succeed, no matter how hard he tried, brought him to a place where he felt unfulfilled. Perhaps Rabbi Elliot was taught how to achieve and do well in the world of man, but he didn't have understanding of the purpose for his life. That is, he didn't have the manufacturer's instruction. Whenever we purchase a computer or an electronic device, it always has a booklet or an internet site where we can get the manufacturer's instruction. Without these instructions, we cannot set it up, learn what the device can do, all the possibilities, and even instructions on troubleshooting if a problem arises. Is it any different for each human being that comes into this world? The Torah in the book of Genesis tells us there is a manufacturer. There is one who created each human being. We're not an accident. We have been purposely created. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Here the Torah states clearly that God created every human being. That means that each one of us was personally created by Adonai's hand. It states that he created us in his image. Many Jewish scholars believe that Psalm 139 is the most excellent of all the Psalms, and I have to agree with that. This became one of my most treasured scriptures when I first came to faith and received Messiah in my life. Of all the scriptures in the Torah, none is more powerfully written about how God designed us intricately in our mother's womb and knows every part of our personality. I'm only going to read a portion of this psalm today, but I encourage you to look it up in the Tanakh, Psalm 139. And I will read verses 13 through 18 today. For you, O God, created my innermost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God, how vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. One Torah teacher, Stephen J. Cole, shares his thoughts about this scripture, about how God, our Creator, was speaking to David. These same scriptures, Psalm 139, verses 13 through 18. And I quote, "Here King David considers that God formed him in his mother's womb. Though hidden from human eyes in that day," and today we can actually get to see that through a sonogram, "yet David was aware that he was not hidden from God's eyes." This is stated in verse 16. David writes that not only did God make us through his creative power, but he also destined all of our days before any one of them came into being. He comes to the realization of how fearfully and wonderfully our human body was made, and this causes him to be full of thanksgiving towards God. Augustine observed, quote, "Men go abroad to wonder at the heights of the mountains, at the huge waves of the seas, at the long courses of the rivers, at the vast compass of the ocean, and at the circular motions of the stars. And yet they pass by themselves without wondering." Consider the miracle of the human body. Every second, more than 100,000 chemical reactions take place in your brain. It has 10 billion nerves to record what you see and hear. That information comes to your brain through the miracle of the eye, which has 100 million receptor cells in each eye. Your retina also has 4 other layers of nerve cells. Altogether, the system makes the equivalent of 10 billion calculations a second before an image even gets to the optic nerve. Once it reaches your brain, the cerebral cortex has more than a dozen separate vision centers in which to process it. Your tear ducts supply a bacteria-fighting fluid to protect your eyes from infection. The tears that fight irritants differ from the tears of sadness, which contain 24% more proteins. That's not to mention the miracle of the ear and how it translates sound waves into meaningful speech and sounds, or of touch, taste, and smell. There is so much more to be talked about, the miracle of the body. But all that means that God has fashioned us. He created and ordained each day in our human life. This gives significance and value to each human life that comes into this world. So David is saying God knows everything about us. He is with us wherever we go. He has created us and ordained the days of our life. We are God's masterpiece. This just gives us a little glimpse of just our body, and God knows every single amazing detail of that because He created it. He designed it. He created it. It was His idea. And He created our personality. He knows how we are made, how we think, what is going to fulfill our lives. As Jeremiah 29:11 says, He has good plans for us, a future and a hope. Can we live a life that's truly fulfilling without the understanding or the involvement of the one who made us? And yet so many people are doing that nowadays and find frustration trying to find what will fulfill them, what will give them peace and love and joy. And that amazing ability to go for the long run when you find that vision and that dream that you believe in. And yet God made us to be people of vision and dream, but He made us to live that out with Him. Isaiah 43:1, the Jewish prophet writes, "But now thus says the Lord, I am He who created you, O Jacob, He who formed you, O Israel. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. Because you are precious in my eyes and honored, and I love you." God calls us His own. He calls us by name. He tells us that we are precious in His eyes, that He honors us and He loves us. Yeshua the Messiah is the one that finally brought fulfillment into Rabbi Elliot's life. Like Rabbi Elliot, will you place your trust in Yeshua today? Because He wants to do the same for you. He has good plans, a future, and a hope for you.
I
Thank you for listening to Tikvah Radio Show, the voice of hope. If you have been blessed by this program and want to join us in sharing with others the hope of Yeshua HaMashiach, a gift of any amount will be appreciated. You can donate and contact us on our website at tikvahradio.com. Once again, that's TIKVAH radio.com. Thank you for joining us, and God bless.